We'll give it one more minute before we get started. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to AI and the Future of B2B Commerce. My name is Emily Kanya. I am with Human Element. I'm the Director of Marketing, and we welcome you today. Thanks for joining us. I want to first go through our goals for this webinar, which are first to give you a high-level overview of AI tools in agentic commerce for B2B selling. We also want to help you understand what's coming and what you can do to stay competitive. And then also we're going to help you understand how you can evolve and advance your business with AI tools. So our panel of experts today are Paul Briscoe. He is the Director of Technology at Human Element. And we have two great partners joining us today. First, Adrian Luna, who is the VP of Growth and Strategic Partnerships at WebScale. And Jason Nias, President and General Manager of Shopware North America. Welcome, guys. Let's go ahead and get started, and I will hand it over to Adrian.
Awesome. Thank you, Emily. The good news is I switched to water a bit ago. I had about 8 or 9 espressos before that, so I'm going to try to slow it down as much as I can, but I'll make sure I don't speed through it. Yeah, as Emily mentioned, I'm the VP of Growth here at WebScale. My background is predominantly have been in cloud infrastructure. I've actually been here with WebScale for about 6 years now. And our organization, we specialize in managing commerce infrastructure for direct-to-consumer and also B2B storefront. So you might ask yourself, well, why in the world is an infrastructure guy here talking to me about AI? Good question. We've had a very strong presence in B2B commerce infrastructure. We keep very close ties to our customer base, talk to them regularly, and as of late, unless you've been living under a rock, nearly every B2B organization in our customer base, and ones that we talk to outside, all are saying the same thing, right? They know they should be, and I'll put this in air quotes, doing something in AI. You feel pressure from customers, they feel pressure from competitors, feel pressure from even their own CEOs that are asking, hey, what are your vendors offering in terms of AI? But immediately, naturally we would ask, well, what is it that you want to do with AI? And most people can't answer that yet. So you're either unsure where to apply it, unsure how to plan the implementation, or even how to measure success. So today, the group of us really are going to try to cut through that noise for you. We want to make AI practical for B2B. We don't want to, keep it in a hypothetical status for you. And by the end of the session, that I'm hoping that you all know the two predominant types of AI that you run across in B2B and what each of them can actually do, but more importantly, where the real value is for your organization. Next slide, please. Awesome. So when B2B companies start to explore AI, they usually run into 2 categories of solutions. You have generative AI, which is there to create content, there to help with insights. Think of it as a way to help individuals move faster. It's really quick to deploy, but the organizational impact can be somewhat limited. That's not to say it's a bad thing. It's just you see gains quickly because people start to use it, right? So think of generative AI as efficiency for people. It produces, and you'll see these things in bold on the left-hand side of the slide. It improves, it helps, but it doesn't do any of this stuff by itself. So it all has to be prompted. Gen AI will give the user an answer or a response in the form of text, in the form of image, in the form of video generation, or even an export to another tool like Sheets or Slides, etc. Fun fact, I created this slide with AI, right? So it actually helped me prepare for exactly doing this, which is what I was going to do anyhow. But instead of having to go through the manual process of putting all this together, I could simply put all of my thoughts down into a tool and say, this is the context that I want to set. How would you lay this out visually on a slide? I have 100 things going on throughout the day, and this helped me kind of dial that part of the content creation, even to prepare for this webinar, down to a matter of minutes. Now, obviously, then you have someone that can come over the top and fine tune things. But as far as getting the content to the point where I can just add a couple of tweaks to it and move on, the efficiency boost is phenomenal, right? So, yeah, I'd say that as a fun fact, and I would challenge anybody that says they don't do that. Anyhow, agentic AI, it's a bit different. Again, in bold, executes, right? Multi-step tasks across systems. It automates workflows end to end. It adapts decisions in real time based on actual business data. So these kind of things take a little bit longer to deploy, but the impact can be massive, right? Think of agents as new digital team members. They're not just tools, they're not just enhancements for people, but they can actually act autonomously as if a person would that doesn't need to eat or sleep. One, I do want to be clear here. One is not better than the other, right? In fact, a lot of times they complement each other, and you'll hear from the team in a bit about different applications and how that actually happens in real time. But the important thing to understand is the difference between the two of these things and how generative AI can really win on speed, but agentic AI will win on impact. You want both, but you got to understand what each of these can do and how to get started. Next slide, please. Awesome. Gen AI, I mentioned this for quick wins. Complements your team, doesn't run autonomously, but here's what generative AI can do in your organization, as quickly as the next week or next month, right? So in operations, think of Gen AI to be able to draft SOPs, process documentation, turn engineering notes into, easily human readable content that could be used in other departments. Engineering, you can summarize, as I just mentioned, long technical specs into really clear internal briefs. This stuff can be done in seconds, right? You can engineer prompts to be able to speak and generate content in a voice that is actually appealing to your brand and for your users. In sales, it can generate product descriptions, right? It can generate proposal content. I just talked about the slide creation that I use this for. So basically take, in your organization, complex components and turn them into really easy product descriptions for the sales team. Marketing, creating brochures, spec sheets, catalog copy at scale. And procurement, drafting, RFQ, RFP narrative responses with clean formatting. All of this stuff is meant to drive efficiency in the business. Super high convenience, super low disruption projects. You can implement them, extremely fast. And again, they help your people work faster. But as I talk through all of that, again, that narrative surfaces of it's not really there to automate your business, right? It's just going to enhance the efficiency of people. My recommendation is that if you haven't already done this, you should really start tinkering with generative AI tools on your own. ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Grok, right? These are all things that you can play with, you can mold, you can have fun with it in your own private space. And it'll only get you more comfortable with using it as you start to think about how implementations of Gen AI can actually enhance job functions for you and for your team. Next slide, please. Awesome. Agentic AI, this is where it gets exciting. Big gains, big capabilities. This is where small thoughts can turn into, really sizable impacts and massive gains for the organization, right? So like I mentioned before, agentic systems are built to operate like digital team members. They'll actually coordinate tasks. They'll actually make decisions. They'll act across the stack. Now they're governed by your business rules, but you get to create the rules the same way that you would create rules for an employee, engagement rules for teams and people. You can do the same thing with agents and it will act on your behalf and within the confinement of the rules that you set. So similar to, how it can impact different organizations, right, in operations, it's not just answering to prompts. It's actually in real time monitoring equipment. It's detecting anomalies. It's auto creating maintenance work orders based on signals that come in. We do this quite a bit in infrastructure, right? We start to get signals that get sent up that typically a human would have to go and read and react to and implement. We're actually able to have agents detect these anomalies and go and do something about it, create work orders, pass tickets to other systems, things like that. In procurement, you can predict supplier delays. You can compare cost. The agent will actually auto-generate purchase orders, again, within approved rules, right? These are just concepts of how you can actually implement agents in a procurement center of your business. Sales and marketing, kind of the same thing, right? And sales, acting as one of the big ones is acting as a logged in shopping assistant. So, not an assistant for your internal employees, but an assistant for users that are interacting with your dealer portals and things like that. They'll recommend products. They'll actually talk to the end user, verify contract pricing. They could build quotes. They can automatically build orders for the logged in user. And then in marketing, obviously generating, personalized bundles, pricing blocks, dynamic landing pages. Personalization is huge in the industry right now because we're realizing that people want to kind of educate themselves in a way that you consume a piece of content, you understand it, you're interested in it, and then when you land on somebody's digital presence like a website or logged in store view, right? You want that experience to follow you. You want to view exactly the content that you were looking for when you were triggered by, the certain social media post or email or something like that. Um, Real world example. You look at Amazon's AI shopping assistant. It's called Rufus. So if you used Amazon recently, you've probably used Rufus without even knowing, right? And what it does, it extends the basic search functions into a live assistant that you can talk to in a natural language. So it's basically there to help you find what you're looking for, maybe consider things that you haven't thought of, gift ideas, things like that. The important part is not so much what it does, but if you looked at Rufus's contribution to a company like Amazon, they saw a 15% boost in retail profits and a 20% reduction in marketing cost. So that's the impact that an agentic system can have at scale. The good news is that you don't have to be a Fortune 500 company or much less a Fortune 10 company like Amazon in order to get those types of gains anymore. That's the reason why, we're here with Human Element, with Shopware, companies like us are essentially putting ourselves out there to democratize agentic capabilities so organizations really of any size can deploy agents that act, that decide to actually create real operational lift for your company. Um, Everything that I said, I'm hoping it sounds exciting and things that you would want to implement within your business. But obviously, it's you've got to think about the chaos that lies beneath the surface whenever you're planning an implementation. I'll toss it over to Paul. He'll talk to you a little bit more about that. But hopefully, the descriptions and the delineation between generative AI and agentic AI will kind of help the rest of this conversation.
Yeah. Thanks, Adrian.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
and yeah, I'm just gonna kind of piggyback off of what he said, like operations, procurement, sales, marketing. A lot of times, like those are some of the broader areas in our businesses where we're trying to figure out ways to improve efficiency. And you can see kind of right away where generative AI has already been able to help. Like Adrian just mentioned, he used generative AI to help lay out his slides. So you can see how in certain siloed parts of businesses that generative AI in isolation can help with small tasks that improve our everyday kind of work-life balance. But when we talk about agentic AI and how that can affect businesses' workflows altogether, especially B2B businesses, there's a lot of work that kind of lies underneath the surface to make some of those things become a reality. And that's a little bit of what I wanted to take some time to focus on, are some of those where we kind of thought we could catalog some of those under the iceberg things that you can do to prepare to try to find usages for agentic AI. And really, we kind of know that those are just some of the areas where there's complexity in businesses. So I'm just going to kind of like take each one of these and give a little overview, starting with data interoperability and semantics. What I would normally think of as like product data normalization, for example. And it's not just that we need the data to be clean, but we need it to be meaningful as well. So in order to use agentic AI properly, that the agent must be able to understand things like product hierarchy, standardized attributes, stock levels, and other data points that they might need to make decisions or to fulfill orders autonomously. So being able to make sure that that data is clean, but also can mean things between different systems within your organization, I think is key to try to make sure that you can operate on it. Another thing that we talk about is compliance, ethics, and trust frameworks. How do you know that you can trust your AI? How do you know that the things that it's telling you are true? So it's more formal, and it tries to aim at addressing those risks in your organization. So trying to set rules for agent behavior and then trying to define like kind of hook-in points where humans can be triggered to say, okay, I need to go check into this. And you want to make sure that if there's any legal implications about ensuring compliance for regulations in your industry, that those things are all being followed as well. So this just kind of alludes to the fact that, yes, I mean, agents have a lot of capability, but there's still a place in there where humans are going to need to intervene to be able to push things along. Um, Another thing that we started to, I'm going to skip a little bit and say that we started to see that there's this internal AI COE, or a center of excellence. And that's, I think, something that we're seeing more and more um, start to form in organizations organically. Like, it might not be a formal title or a formal department, but you're seeing IT leaders and leaders of organizations seeing the need that there's internal experimentation, that they need to have dedicated teams that are exploring and piloting those specific agentic use cases. Those, I think, are emerging parts of the businesses that now we know are um, starting to become integral to make all of these other bullet points work as well. When we talk about system orchestration and API strategy, it's not just focusing like on, APIs that your systems might use to talk from the ecom platform to the ERP or to the PIM. It's more that the agents need to be able to hook into those ERPs, into your CRM, into your inventory system to be able to execute actual actions. Like, can they place an order? Can they check if freight's available for a specific item? Or can they create a quote? And then what happens as a part of that? So all of the thought processes behind how you might be able to make that work is some of the R&D that needs to get invested into trying to see how agentic AI can work in your department, which kind of leads into a little bit of this idea of having a 360-degree view of your customer. And that just kind of, when you think about who your customers are and the products that they're ordering, the actions that they're taking, that's where you start to kind of see a little bit of the breadth of the information that agents might need in order to be able to do some of these AI processes. So that could be things like those customers needing specific contracts, credit terms, knowing what their past order history is, or knowing if there is relationship specific pricing for that customer, and how that impacts everything else that happens after the fact. So after you build that context of the customer, then how do you apply it to the rest of the data that is kind of underneath that iceberg? The last thing I guess we kind of can talk about is in this slide is that this autonomous supply chain and financial flows. So this is just kind of hearkening to the complexity that most B2B organizations have around finance and around logistics. So what happens if you can place an order? How do agents integrate into your financial system? How could they integrate into your supply chain system again, for automated invoicing, potentially for fraud detection, for shipment tracking and order updates? All of those things that right now require intervention or require separate individual processes, you can try to think about how and prepare your systems to think about how they can all interact together, and building out a strategy for understanding how, for your individual business, making all of those things work together so that you can lead up into the tip of the iceberg, which is agentic AI. So I think that's the meat of what we see when we think about how you can apply all of this strategy to agentic AI. Next slide, please. So this is again just kind of Adrian mentioned Rufus. That's one of the examples that we just kind of wanted to call out because we see it happening. And this is just a kind of another view, a little bit of what we're talking about with the iceberg analogy that with your user data, with all of your product data, with all of your infrastructure, your marketing and your transaction data, all of that under the covers is kind of leading into this integrated agentic AI. So that when you just simply say, or you see a prompt on your browser that says, do you want to pick up where you left off? You were looking at these crock pots. There is so much more underneath that is going on to allow you to be able to do that. And that centralizing your data and working on making all of this stuff uniform will kind of allow some of those things to happen inside of your organization. Next slide. So this is, I don't want to say this is a boring slide, but nobody really likes to always talk about change management. But one of the things that we do kind of see happening as a result of using AI in your organization is that there's a little bit of a shock wave that's happening in managing this what we're calling non-technical change. So you might be familiar with having change logs or change management for processes, but the thing that we are seeing kind of happening right now is that again there's new roles that are emerging and there's this autonomous workforce that's happening, but it becomes more than that in your organization. And we're seeing that there's like hidden financial orchestrations and costs that are associated with implementing AI. So if you think about like how you might have an enterprise account for using Gemini or using ChatGPT or using Perplexity. The question becomes, are each of your employees on your team, are they using their own account or are they asking you for a license? And then if so, who's paying for that? Like obviously like your company will start to pay for that, but think about all the other line items in your budget that could be affected by that. R&D for some of that data normalization that we're talking about, the working with the financial teams to try to figure out if there are ways to integrate automation there somewhere, trying to figure out how to connect your agents to your PIM or your ERP. All of that research and development is kind of going undocumented. And what we're seeing is that is all unbudgeted. And we can't just treat this AI R&D in your organization as a department line item budget because it's going to blow up and become exponentially bigger. So that's kind of one of the things that we're trying that we're seeing that leaders in your businesses can kind of get in front of now and start talking about and trying to strategize about how they're going to use AI to kind of uncover what some of those shadow budgets might be, how to cover some of that operational cost, and then trying to find a way to value some of that foundational work so that you can start to see an ROI on some of this work that your teams are doing across the board. And then when we talk about like governance, risk, and trust frameworks, really what we're trying to say is that there are definite things about like being able to define AI accountability on your teams, trying to make sure that you have audit trails for things that your teams are doing, even if it's with AI, so that you can kind of go back and see what's happening. And then if there are things like licensing risks, and then just trying to understand what are like if there's any issues with like ethics or cross-functional alignment, and making sure that your team has a roadmap for how to use AI in your business, and just making sure that you're understanding how much of an impact that this will have on your organization, and really just planning for change and making sure that you're accommodating it. I think that's all I have to say about that. So I'm going to pass it over to Jason.
That was your Forrest Gump moment, and that's all I have to say about that. All right. Well, excellent job, Adrian, Emily, and Paul. One of the things I wanted to do on this moment is kind of zoom out and really benefit from a little bit of a look back in history as to where we've come from. And if we're speaking about B2B, you go all the way back to the 2000s when you started talking about the digital foundations and kind of the evolution, or the advent, I should say, of channel conflict. In the 2010s, we started launching portals and punch outs, and that got pretty big adoption in the B2B use cases. Well, now we're at this spot where Gen AI launched 3 years ago, and agentic commerce is the wave of today. And it's really interesting because it depends on who you listen to, but you've got people who are saying hire AI, not humans. And other people are saying, no, Gen AI's got game, agentic commerce is the future, find ways to integrate it. And the answer is almost always somewhere in between. So now let's take a look on the next slide to talk a little bit about where we are at in the adoption curve. And the truth is, we're a lot further along than most of the megatrends we've lived through. This has hit us harder and faster. On the left hand, you see operational functions, things like IT and human resources, risk and compliance, all the way down the list. And on the right, you see the industries. What's almost universally true is there's very few zeros on the page, which means that almost every industry and almost every function is being impacted by AI, which I think is a really good segment to talk about how the fact that people are trying to figure out, we're in that experimental phase to figure out how you can do your job better, faster, and cheaper, which is a really good thing. We tried to use the quote, resistance is futile, because I actually think it's one of those technologies that you just never go back from. And it's a little bit of a nod to the Star Trek fans in the world around this is here to stay. So the next slide. Now let's talk a little bit about one function in particular, which is probably the largest expense and biggest driver of revenue inside B2B organizations. And that's the sales reps. And I pulled this report from Salesforce, the State of Sales report. You can Google it and find it. And you can actually pick different industries. For this use case, I picked manufacturing. And what's really, really interesting is this moment that we're in history. The sales reps for these B2B companies, there's roughly 1 million of them in the United States, okay? These 1 million sales reps, on average, spend about 1/3 of their time actually selling and 2/3 not selling. And when you zoom out, what you realize is that we've overly burdened these people with a whole bunch of things. In fact, go to the next slide, please. The world looks a little bit like this. We've got, on the left side, you've got Roberta, and she is hired because of how good she is at building trust and relationships and selling value, investing time. She's motivated by her comp plan. She understands your company's margins, all of that stuff. And it's really, in principle, when people hire sales, what they think about what they need. On the right is the burden that we've put on Roberta to be more of a robot, to execute workflows, to understand pricing dynamics, to integrate everything to different ship-tos and different ERP integrations and all the different things. And the burden on that sales rep's enormous. So the reason I share this is we're at this really interesting moment when AI can actually help us out of this overly regulated, overly burdened employee base. That, again, is the largest center of cost and the largest driver of revenue. Next slide. So let's double click into where we think AI, Gen AI, as well as agentic commerce can play a role. And the good news is when we break down the 67% of their time not selling, again, 2/3, it is 1/4 of their time is spent doing administrative tasks, 10 hours a week. The second place is service tasks, doing things to make sure that everything is buttoned up, they're getting what they need, they're getting their answers to their questions. And then finally, traveling, something we do probably want them doing, but it comes at a cost. And so the first way to really take advantage of some of the AI and Gen AI and agentic commerce is to work with technologies companies that are forward thinking about automation, automating business processes. In our world, it's a sales agent to automate rebuys. It's also things like rules and flow builder that allow you to take all of the complexities of the back end and automate them into the hands of the sales rep so that these things can become more autonomous and can happen automatically. We think there's a huge unlock of time just by using B2B features in a way that they're designed. The second unlock, next slide, is really around agentic. And what agentic commerce, these guys have done a fabulous job setting it up. In my overly simplistic way of thinking, you've got systems inside of your business that you can control, and then you've got a whole bunch of other systems that exist in a bunch of different places. And building agents that can go across those systems, perform complex tasks, and come back with them mostly or all the way complete. So at Shopware, the way that we're thinking about it is we're creating all of these different agents that our clients can go subscribe to. And one of them, it's on the right there, is a competitive trend scout. And what this one does is it goes and says, tell me the names of the companies you're competing with. Tell me the SKUs that are similar to the SKUs you're selling. And it will go out at the frequency you want, look at those prices, and come back to your system and automatically adjust them for the sales reps so that they can sell and be within a range you want from a pricing perspective. Okay. These are tools today that the sales reps are spending their time and their energy, and they're trying to research to really thread the needle on pricing, when that could be the function of an agent. Okay. So it's these types of ways that you're thinking about how you can use agentic commerce to enable the field, the sellers, to be more efficient, essentially getting them time back to perform more like Roberta and less like the robot. Next slide. Paul, bring us home.
Yeah, this is just, I think, another view of one of the things that you kind of already mentioned, was that back, before this AI revolution kind of started, the B2B business was happy to kind of sit back a little bit and watch and see what happened and developed in B2C, and then kind of use the learnings from B2C and try to take out the things that they thought were important and apply those concepts to B2B, which are the basics of, e-com business, and enablement for ordering online. The next kind of evolution that started happening were these customer portals and services, like having punch out inside of your applications, and then trying to figure out how to enable your service people to interact with those customers in those portals. Now what we're seeing is this, kind of what Jason's talking about, and what Adrian's kind of set us up for, is this 360-degree connected sales, where we have our salespeople focused on sales, we have our developers focused on development, we have our projects focused on their projects, and all in that, that whole picture, we're enabling our company to sell and using and finding methods to use AI. And I think that now, as we go even beyond that, if you think about what the future might hold for that, if we're kind of leading up into this curve, we're kind of setting ourselves up to perform beyond expectations for our businesses. So.
All right. Well, thank you guys. Thanks, Jason, Adrian, and Paul, for your expertise. To wrap it up, we just want to let you know how each of us can help B2B businesses with this sort of thing. So on the human element side, we can provide strategy and implementation. WebScale provides infrastructure and AI readiness, and Shopware is there with the API first commerce platform. If you have questions or you want to chat a bit more about this, please feel free to scan this QR code, submit your information. We'll contact you, set up some time to talk with one of these guys, or go ahead and email them directly here. Emails are on the screen. But thanks again for everyone attending. It's been great. Thanks again to our presenters, and we'll see you all next time. Bye, everyone.